Okay, so I wanted to make a video on immigration because there's so much talk about that these days, and a lot of Catholic bishops getting involved, things like that. So I thought I might review, what does the church teach about this? What are the relevant teachings of the church? Are there any? And yeah, the answer is yes. So there's two major precedents and encyclicals on this. One is Pope Leo the 13th's 1889 encyclical on the devotion to Saint Joseph that touches on the subject, and then Saint John the 23rd, his encyclical Pacem in Terris. So we can start actually the one on Saint from Pope Leo the 13th was before John the 23rd, but we're going to talk about Pacem in Terris first. First of all, Pacem in Terris is the encyclical where it's explicitly stated that a person has a right to immigrate to a country in which they hope to, I'm kind of quoting from the encyclical, hope to be able to provide more fittingly for himself and his dependents. That's where it explicitly states that. And that it's the duty of state officials to accept such immigrants. Okay, but there's a catch. So far as the good of their own community, rightly understood, permits. Okay, that's the catch. That to further the aims of those who may wish to become members of a new society. So it's up to the immigrating country to decide as far as the good of their own community, rightly understood, permits. So that's the problem right there. So if the country decides that it's not for the good of their community to admit the people, they don't have to. And then St. John the 23rd noted that they made a couple other notations in this encyclical, that the minority groups frequently tend to magnify unduly characteristics proper to their own people. In other words, they concentrate a lot on their own culture, and they ignore the good of the entire human family, and that should subserve the interests of their own particular groups. In other words, they're not assimilating, and that's not good. So he said they should realize that their constant association with a people steeped in a different civilization from their own has no small part to play in the development of their own particular genius and spirit. In other words, it would be good for them to associate in the new culture and the new civilization where they have immigrated to. And he says, little by little they can absorb into their very being those virtues which characterize the other nation. But for this to happen, these minority groups must enter into some kind of association with the people in whose midst they are living and learn to share their customs and way of life. It will never happen if they sow seeds of disaffection which can only produce a harvest of evils, stifling the political development of nations. We're going to come back to that. And Pope Leo XIII also spoke about immigration and seeking a quote-unquote better life. And to keep in mind that actually the better life the church primarily preaches is the better life of eternal life, not material life. That's a secondary thing. It's not the most important thing. So, but Pope Leo XIII did say the poor and those who live by the labor of their hands should be of good heart and learn to be just. If they win the right of emerging from their poverty and obtaining a better rank by lawful means, reason and justice uphold them in changing the order established. There again, there's the little catch. By lawful means. Then it says here, but recourse to force and struggles by seditious paths to obtain such ends are madness, which only aggravate the evil they aim to suppress. Let the poor then, if they would be wise, trust not to the promises of seditious men. These coyotes and human smugglers come to mind. but rather to the example and patronage of the blessed Joseph and to the maternal charity of the church, which each day takes an increasing compassion on their lot. I mean, that's pretty clear. Okay, so what does that mean? What that means is, the other thing, the primary thing that the church has always taught is that it's the duty of every person to obey the civil authorities and to obey civil law. Our Lord was the first one to say that when he said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." And then St. Peter echoed that in one of his letters. Obey all civil lawful authority comes from God. St. Paul, same thing. Obey all civil authorities. Okay, so what about that? So people have a duty to two things. People have a duty to obey immigration law, and the government has a duty to enforce it. That's the other thing. It's the duty of the government to enforce its laws. If a law shouldn't be enforced, it should be taken off the books, and that's the job of Congress. So that's the other thing, is people have complaints about the immigration laws. Yeah, I mean, I don't like them either, but as long as they're the laws on the books, they have to be obeyed and enforced. So what are the complaints of the bishops? They're standing with these people who are protesting. Well, what are they protesting anyway? And even Pope Leo, issued some kind of a statement about it, and it was interpreted, of course, by the secular press as attacking the American administration for enforcing the laws, but that's actually not what Pope Leo said. Pope Leo quoted something else that has to do with asylum and detainments and this sort of things, where he said they must not be submitted to inhumane treatment, and that's true. That's another thing that's somewhere else in treatment of people. They must not be subjected to inhumane treatment. That's absolutely true. Of course, the problem is that interpreting, well, what is inhumane treatment? I've personally never seen a jail that looked like a fun place to be, or a detainment center. Yeah, I mean, it's not Disneyland, let's face it. So that's a little disingenuous. And then you have the bishops, they're excusing people who are afraid of being arrested. Really? Well, that's a new one. What? Is that just immigration law? What if you're afraid of being arrested for being a fugitive on the run for murder? You can be your excuse from going to mass then? Wow, that's the new standard. If you're afraid of being arrested for something, for a crime you've committed, you don't have to go to mass. Wow, who knew? Yeah, because and then the complaint is, well, the administration said they're only going after, violent criminals and people that have committed horrible crimes. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, that, because you're going to prioritize your law enforcement. Every law enforcement's prioritized. Get something stolen from you, or some crime committed against you, vandalism or something, report it to the police, see what happens. Yeah, you're going to be low priority. They don't go after everything. They never go after everything. So it's not, that's a standard enforcement thing. There's too much crime, they can't go after everything. So, because technically if they went, they could go after every person in this country that's here illegally, because they're subject to deportation. Try to enter into this country illegally sometime, come to an airport without the proper documentation. You're going to be on a plane heading back to wherever you came. You're not coming in here. And so technically, yeah, every person here illegally is subject to deportation. So if they get caught up in a raid or a sweep or something, and if they haven't committed any other crime other than being here, failing to report for their hearings, for whatever it might be, and then you should read immigration law. I mean, you can get deported for all kinds of things if you're not a citizen. Yeah, it's pretty rough. But it's the law. So, and enforcing it's not wrong. It's according to the teachings of the church. That's what the church teaches. Actually, the church teaches that that the government has a duty to enforce all laws. So, all this posturing, I mean, that's a little bit disingenuous. And yeah, I'd like to know, what have the Catholic bishops done on the second part here that Pope John the 23rd talked about people that they need to, little by little, they can absorb into their very being those virtues which characterize the other nation. The minority groups must enter into some kind of association with the people in whose midst they are living and learn to share their customs and way of life. Is that what's happening? Do the Catholic bishops foster that? Not in my experience. Not at all. Are they encouraging these people to learn English and accustomize themselves to the American way of life? Not that I see. No, they've adopted the devil's pathway of multiculturalism, which, yeah, that's the devil wants. The devil doesn't want, one culture of a united people. That was the old thing, e pluribus unum, out of many one. And that was right. Yeah, you can't have a nation that's just got all these factions. That's the devil wants that. Divide people. Keep them divided by language, culture. Let them segregate into little groups, which what Pope St. John the 23rd was saying was destructive. It stifles political development of nations. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. Do the Catholic bishops do that? No. They fragment the church to the highest degree. They'll have masses said in 15 different languages. Nobody can understand anything because they're celebrating all these other cultures. Now that's not the way. And it probably doesn't help when you've had a previous pope that apparently didn't like the United States, appointed foreign bishops into this country. They don't have any love for the United States. Yeah, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. Can we speak the truth? It would be better to have to do it according to God's plan, which what St. John the 23rd was talking about. They haven't been doing that. They don't do that. So they've got nothing to talk about. They're hypocrites, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Okay? That's the truth of it. All right, and that's pretty much on that. We'll talk about some other things too in a sec.